World Fairs, the final goodbye to the old world, and a new history begins. So, the first World Fair we will explore is the Great Exhibition of London in 1851. Officially titled the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of All Nations, quite a mouthful, held in London's Hyde Park between May 1st and October 15th, 1851. It was a groundbreaking event designed to showcase the industrial, technological and cultural achievements of nations around the world. Conceived by Prince Albert, husband of the Queen Lizard herself, Victoria, the event was a celebration of Britain's growing industrial power. But it was also aimed to promote international cooperation and the exchange of ideas. Despite being a time of significant colonialism and empire building, exhibits from India, China and other British colonies were displayed alongside European nations, fostering a sense of global interconnectedness. Over 14,000 exhibitors from countries across Europe, the Americas, Asia and beyond participated, showcasing innovations in machinery, textiles, design and art. The exhibition marked a turning point in how industry, technology and sciences were celebrated on a global stage, and it set a precedent for future world expositions. So, being the first, this was a major event. Some of the celebrities of the day, British celebrities of the day, that visited the exhibition included the likes of Charles Darwin, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and I think Michael Faraday was there as well. There was a few others. So some key facts to look at as we examine this expedition. Time to build the expedition. So construction started on July 1850 and it was completed by March 1851. The total time to build was approximately 9 months from groundbreaking to completion. The Crystal Palace, which is this building right here, which was the epicenter of the exhibition, cost approximately £170,000 to build, which is about 25 million in today's money. And the total cost of the exhibition as a whole was about 240,000, so about 35 million in total. A total of over 6 million people visited the Great Exhibition during its 6-month run, and at its peak, the exhibition welcomed over 100,000 visitors in a single day. And just to inspect this in a little bit more detail, this Crystal Palace right here, it was considered an architectural marvel for its use of prefabricated materials and its sheer size. It covered 990,000 square feet. So to put that into context and perspective, if you were to take the Empire State Building and was to flip it horizontally, this building right here, the Crystal Palace, would be longer than the Empire State Building and was made up of 300,000 panels of glass and 4,500 tons of cast iron. It was designed to be dismantled and reassembled. So here we are in Victorian era playing fucking Lego on a grand scale. It was moved more than 7 miles away after the exhibition to Sydenham in South London as a proposed permanent structure. So just wrap your head around that. This building, which was made up of over 300,000 panels of glass and 4,500 tons of cast iron. How were they making this glass? Let's have a little look. How were they mass producing this quantity and quality of glass in 1851? Now they say that the glass was manufactured in the Midlands of the United Kingdom. I can't remember the specific location, but it was somewhere up in the Midlands, the West Midlands of the UK. And it was all transported down and then built like a fucking Lego house in Hyde Park. And we can see there are a few pictures of this expedition, but not many. Most that we see are artistic depictions, which is odd because obviously they had photographic evidence, or I should say, sorry, photographic technology during that time. So why did they not take more photographic pictures instead of just drawings? And why was there no construction photos of the Crystal Palace? I would like to know. If it was such an architectural marvel of the time, you'd think that they would document it. Obviously they were in a rush. 9 months from, setting the foundation stone, or it's not stone, but groundbreaking to completion. They didn't have time to be taking photos. No, they were very busy. Busy. And the fact that they started building it in July and it was completed in March. So, they started in summertime and they built all the way through autumn and winter and spring. I can tell you now, it would be very, very hard work to be building like this, a contraption like this during the winter months when there's no electricity, you've got no power tools, you haven't even really got any mass-produced accessible steam powered tools, and you're building a construction like this through the winter months in the space of 9 months altogether. The Italian Court, Sir Charles Dickinson's comprehensive pictures of the Great Exhibition. I mean, again, look at all of this that we're seeing in here. Very interesting. And another thing, 6 million people visited the Great Exhibition during its 6-month run. 6 million people. How are they all getting to the exhibition? How are they being fed? How are they being watered? Is that the correct term? How are they being sheltered? London didn't have obviously it's a big city and it was the capital, but it didn't have the resources to be able to feed and shelter 6 million people over the space of 9 months, and 100,000 people in one day. I also find this interesting that the first ever public toilets were featured at the exhibition. The first public flush toilets, called the retiring rooms, designed by George Jennings. Over 827,000 people paid a penny to use them, leading to the phrase, spending a penny. It's very interesting. And then the fact that it was moved more than 7 miles away to South London as a proposed permanent structure. So it was built as a temporary structure, but then it was moved 7 miles. Again, you have to deconstruct all of this, put it back into its Lego box, and then take it 7 miles south and then reconstruct it with the idea of it being permanent. It's a bit of a hard one to believe, really, isn't it? And it's interesting that they don't have photos of the original, but they have photos only on the inside of the original. But then they have photos on the outside of the second variation or version of it, being built almost twice as big, and was reassembled within 2 years from it being taken down at the end of the exhibition. 1854, but then burnt down in 1936. Not suspicious in the slightest here. So here's a picture of the Crystal Palace in its new location. And then this was it burnt down into its own footprint in 1936. I mean, look at the size of this thing. We're led to believe that they built this in 1851 or 1852, and it took them 2 years to rebuild this. And when they decided to rebuild it, somehow they managed to, sprawl an extra 100% of it and made it double the size out of nowhere. Doesn't talk about having to then produce all of the additional glass. Didn't talk about having to produce all the extra cast iron. Very interesting. So that was the original World's Fair. And then we move to Paris in 1889, the exhibition Universelle. The 1889 Paris Expedition Universelle was held to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the French Revolution. It was a showcase of industrial, scientific, and cultural achievements of France and other nations, but its most enduring legacy is the construction of the Eiffel Tower, which was unveiled at the entrance arch of the expedition. The fair was a symbol of France's modernity. Slightly different understanding of modernity back then to what it is now, and its place as a world leader in technology and innovation. It also highlighted France's recovery for political turmoil and solidified Paris's position as a cultural and architectural beacon. So the construction began, or preparations began for the expedition in 1886, and the construction of the Eiffel Tower started in 1887, finishing, as they do. They're on a very strict schedule here. Very strict construction schedule, and they finished just in time for the fair's opening in 1889. The fairgrounds and pavilions were built over a period of about 3 years, transforming the Champ de Mars and surrounding areas into the main exhibition site. So the cost itself cost approximately 41 million francs, equivalent to about $8 to $10 million at the time. And the cost of the Eiffel Tower alone was about 7.8 million francs, which is about $1.5 million. I mean, what can $1.5 million buy you now? Here in the UK, a little fucking hole in the wall in London somewhere, but back then it was getting you the Eiffel Tower. Funded by both private investors and the French government. Highlights of technologies introduced. So we have the Eiffel Tower itself, and electricity. The fair emphasized the growing use of electricity. So this was around the time frame, remember, when I discussed at the beginning of the presentation that it was around the late 1800s, 1880s, early 1890s where we started to see electric lighting beginning to be utilized across the world. Hydraulic elevators. The elevators in the Eiffel Tower were an early example of hydraulic elevator technology. Telecommunications, early telephone technology and telegraph advancements were exhibited, showcasing the rapid progress in global communication. And machinery in the machinery hall, which is this big building over here. The expedition attracted over 32 million visitors during its run from May 6th to October 31st, making it one of the most attended world fairs of all time. Again, 32 million people. How are they being transported to? How are they being fed? And how are they being sheltered during this World Fair? I would like to know. 32 million people is a lot of people. Some of the controversy surrounding the World Fair at the time is that it was the first World Fair to exhibit these, which I'll show some pictures of later on, human zoos, where they featured people from colonialized nations in reconstructed villages, reinforcing imperial and racial hierarchies. So between this and the 1904 St. Louis expedition, there was over 2,000 indigenous cultures that were showcased to the onlooking visitors. I got some pictures later on. It's very interesting. A women's pavilion. This was one of the first fairs to include a dedicated women's pavilion, showcasing the contributions of women to art, science, and culture. How progressive of the French. Time to deconstruct the exposition. The fair officially ended on October 31st, 1889, and deconstruction of the temporary pavilions began soon after. Most structures were dismantled within a year, although some key structures like the Eiffel Tower was preserved, and the Galerie des Machines was left standing until 1910, after which it was dismantled just before the First World War. The site was then redeveloped for later urban projects. So here's a little aerial view of it itself. I mean, we can see that it takes up quite a big footprint. In Paris, this is obviously the Eiffel Tower. Then we have this machinery building over here, and then we have some of the smaller pavilions. So all of this was built to be temporary, supposedly. All of this around here as well, all temporary. And I'll show you some pictures in a minute, and we will question if it looked temporary. So here's another perspective of it. And this is a blueprint schematic of the layout. And this is actually something, whilst I've got you here in part 1, this will be revisited slightly in part 2, in that, doesn't that look like a computer chip to you? If you had like a motherboard and you had like the CPU, the GPU, you know, you've got the CN river here, could be like a cooling deck, heat deck for it. But we're going to explore that in much more detail in part 2, because I think that these were originally already here, and they did play a part within the global motherboard. But yeah, very interesting nonetheless. Let's have a little look at some of the main attractions of the fair here. So this is a picture inside the grand gallery of various industries. So again, this was all built within 4 years, we're told. So just look at the intricacies of this architecture. I mean, they even have to tell you architecture there. Little pyramid right there, little interesting symbol. I mean, does this look temporary to you? And if we look at the floor, this floor looks old, you know, this doesn't look like newly laid floor. This looks like very old. This looks like if you were to go into a church that's a few hundred years old that hasn't really been seen to, and all of this detailing on the floor is just faded over time. So the grand gallery of various industries. It almost looks like here, back in the day, they would have had like statues, and this bit's just been repurposed. Little chandelier hanging off, but look, this looks like there should be statues here. But this floor just looks very old. I mean, there's cracks in it already. You know, if it was supposedly new, it should look brand new, right? And then this building here, the entrance to the exhibition hall. Again, a lot of like Phoenician adornments. Little cherubim up here. I mean, none of this looks temporary, at all, in the slightest. I mean, it looks kind of weathered, it looks kind of old. With the wrought iron as well. I mean, there might have been aspects of it that were, as I do believe, there was aspects of it that were temporary, that were built to be temporary, and I will show you that. But then there's also buildings that were definitely not temporary. You don't build this sort of level of architecture in the space of a few years just for it to be temporary, for it to be pulled down. So this building, the Dome of Beaux Arts, again, beautiful building. I mean, what do you think when you look at these pictures? If you wasn't told where this was or what point in time, and you were just told that this building was built within the space of 2-3 years with the idea of it being completely temporary, what would you think about that? What would be your intuitive response to that? Look at this building here. The central dome of the exhibition. I mean, look at the magnificence of this building. Absolutely epic. Look at the adornments. Look at the detailing. Just the overkill of attention to detail. It's so unnecessary if this was just meant to be a temporary building. Made out of supposedly plaster as well. Supposedly a lot of them were plaster clad. Which, again, you do see some of the buildings later on and they do look like they were made from plaster. But this is definitely not plaster. This is very advanced masonry. This is very advanced architecture. This is not something that can be thought up and planned within a year, only to then be constructed within like 2 years, ready to go for the exhibition. Another one of the buildings here. Again, just the urban planning. You know, we already covered that with the American towns. Just to be able to survey all this, to level everything out, do all the groundwork, all the digging, set all the foundation in place to build all of this. Like, these are big buildings. You know, they require like a very well thought out foundation plan in order for these to be able to stand. And then this was the Gallery of the Machines, 1889, 1899. Again, just massive construction. Here we are with another picture of the Gallery of Beaux Arts. So that we've seen the central dome, and then it just continues outwards, and just look at this. You know, nothing temporary about this whatsoever. There are construction photos of the Eiffel Tower. But again, the construction photos of the Eiffel Tower, which I haven't included in this because there's a lot of them, they all look very odd in that the scale is always off in regards to the actual Eiffel Tower itself and what's underneath it and what's in the background. Like, as you see the progression of this tower being built out, everything that's underneath it and in the immediate sort of foreground and background, the perspective of the scales shift dramatically, and it just doesn't make sense. One minute this thing's small, and then the next thing this thing's big. Maybe something we'll explore in future videos, but look at all of this. The Grand Gallery of various industries. I mean, all of this Antiquitech. So again, you know, visitors were coming in and they were seeing the latest technology of the day. But why is the latest technology of the day very reminiscent of the technology we see that, you know, has been built into cathedrals or these old world buildings? It's all the same style. Like, this is like a micro version of it. In fact, maybe the new technology of the day was like how they managed to miniaturize it. They found a way to be able to miniaturize it, much as we've done from, you know, the first mobile phones and computers to today, the advancement in being able to scale down computer chips. Maybe they found a way to scale down this technology to this size. And look at this, the exhibition of marble sculptures. I mean, just look at this building. This must be in that the Beaux Arts exhibition. It looks like this is the dome for it, but look at the attention to detail. Every little nook and crevice of this building has some form of detailing on. Like, there's no part that hasn't been given the most attentive level of detail applied to it. Beautiful. Very beautiful. So that's some of the key buildings and attractions of the Paris World Fair. Now we're shifting our attention across the pond to Chicago, aka Shalaga, in 1893. The World's Columbian Expedition, as it was known as, was held to commemorate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas in 1492. And it was one of the most significant and grandiose world fairs in history, taking place in the, I guess like the epicenter of the Gilded Age within America, symbolizing the height of the Gilded Age in the United States. The fair was designed to showcase the United States' progress in technology, culture, and industrial power to both American citizens and the world. Nicknamed the White City for its neoclassical buildings painted white, the expedition spread over 600 acres and included the exhibitions from 46 countries. Construction of the exposition began in 1891 and was completed just in time for the grand opening on May 1st, 1893. Again, very good with their timekeeping, the peoples of this day. The entire process took about 2 years from initial groundwork to completion, and the planning led by Daniel Burnham, very interesting character. You can do a little bit of digging yourself on this fella here and what his background was, began even earlier, in 1890, meaning that the whole endeavour took less than 4 years to plan, build, operate and finally destroy. The total cost of the exposition was approximately $28.7 million, which is about somewhere between $850 million to $1 billion in today's money. Some of the technologies introduced at this World Fair was the Ferris wheel, which we will have a look at in a minute, the world's first Ferris wheel. Electricity and lighting, so this was powered by Tesla's AC system. Moving walkway. The fair introduced the first example of a moving walkway, a precursor to the modern airport travelator. So they had these on the streets, not just in airports back then. The dishwasher. Debuted the automatic dishwasher, it later became a popular household appliance. And the zipper, the precursor to the modern zipper, was introduced as an automatic continuous clothing closure. Over the course of the fair's 6-month run, it attracted over 27 million visitors, which was an astounding number considering the US population at the time was about 63 million. So almost half. Now, I'm not saying that all Americans, they were all American, there was global visitors as well, but in comparison, close to almost half of America visited this World Fair, so we're told. And on October 9th, it saw the largest crowd of any single day in attendance with over 700,000 visitors. That is a lot of people. A lot of people. Some interesting facts, that it was the first time that the Star-Spangled Banner was played at an official event, and then it became cemented as a patriotic song and became from there on out the American national anthem. Such a shit national anthem. Fucking boring. All national anthems are fucking dumb and stupid, but yeah, I'd have to say that Star-Spangled Banner is the worst. Just my opinion, of course. Human zoos, again. Some more controversy, as ethnological villages were featured, showcasing indigenous communities from around the world in recreated traditional environments, a reflection of the colonial mindset of the time. Okay. And then after the expedition closed on October 30th, 1893, much of the fair was dismantled or burned down within the following months. Some things they couldn't just dismantle, so they had to burn to the ground. Some buildings were designed to be temporary, so we were told, and were demolished quickly after the fair ended, while others were burned in a fire that broke out shortly after the fair ended. So the fire wasn't even planned. It just broke out shortly after, coincidentally. Not too long after the Chicago Great Fire, which happened about 30 years prior. These fires, they seem to like these places where a lot of epic stone buildings used to stand. And the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago is housed in one of the few surviving buildings, originally the Palace of Fine Arts. So again, just a little look. This was the Court of Honor that we were looking at earlier on. This is, I guess, like a bird's eye perspective of it. You can see the sort of scale that we're looking at here. Look how big these buildings are. Like that building here just looks like a computer chip to me. It looks like a big CPU. The size of these buildings to be built, and again, these buildings here, I'll show you some pictures later, and we'll see these buildings in like real life. These buildings, we're told, were built to be temporary, purely temporary, nothing permanent about them, so we're told. All built with wood, plaster, clay. Yeah, that's what they want to tell us. But we look at this here. This looks like not just an old world city of Shalaga, but you know, this looks like this could have been like a governmental area of old world Shalaga. You know, some very, very impressive buildings here. So some of the key buildings themselves. Let's have a little look. So this is the manufacturer's building. I mean, again, just look how tiny these people are in comparison to the size of this. And this was a temporary building. Please tell me how you make that to be temporary. How is that safe? To make that out of the materials that we're told that it was made from. How is that safe to build something on that scale? This is a massive health hazard. If this is made from temporary materials that don't provide the structural integrity to be able to support the mass, height, width, the size and scale of this building, then you know it's not safe for people to be walking around here. You know, all you need is a little bit of wind, or you know, some bit of adverse weather, and this could all topple in if it was temporary, like we're told. It was a nice view from above. I mean, just beautiful. This is old world America. This is the pinnacle of old world America. This summarizes it. Look at this. It's like ancient Rome. Maybe ancient Rome was old world America. Maybe ancient Rome was built off the inspiration of old world America. Let's flip the script a little bit. What came first? Ancient Rome or ancient America? Again, look at all of this. You know, in order to be able to dig out all of this, to fill up this ravine, this lake, that would take so long without power tools, without heavy machinery. The peristyle from the lake, I mean, look at this. Something that you would expect to see in Rome. All these adornments as well. The details, the main entrance of the art palace. So this art palace is still here today, and it's now a museum. Again, that one just happened to be permanent. It was like all the others were temporary, but oh, this one we just decided to make as permanent. Again, even if they decided to make that as a permanent building, look at the size of this building. You know, these big Greco-Roman columns. The Golden Door of Transportation building. Very cool. This is the Ferris wheel. So this Ferris wheel could hold hundreds of people per car. Hundreds of people per car. That's absolutely crazy, like the size of this thing. The agricultural building again, another view, another angle with that. Utilizing all of the antenna here with flags. Good guys, good cover. And then the machinery hall. Again, you know, what part of this is temporary? And this was one of the first things that really opened my eyes to the real history of America. As soon as I saw this and was told that this was temporary, I was like, yeah, this is bullshit. Look at this. It is like a European city in its golden age. To have the technology to build this, you know, the fact that it would have taken just a year to conceive this, to actually plan it out, and then it took a further 3 years to build all of this out. You know, big obelisk in the middle as well. So out of place, so out of time. The Chicago, the Midwest, in the late 19th century. And then we move on to St. Louis in 1904. So we're in the early 20th century now, but still a lot of what I want to discuss applies. So the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, commonly known as the St. Louis World Fair, was held on April 30th to December 1st, 1904 in St. Louis, Missouri. to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Louisiana Purchase. The fair was a massive event designed to showcase the achievements of the United States and the world, with particular emphasis on technological innovations, art, culture, and progress from the US and countries around the globe. The fair covered 1,200 acres in Forest Park and attracted millions of visitors. It is especially remembered for the grand architecture of its temporary neoclassical buildings, temporary again, the introduction of new foods like ice cream cones and Dr. Pepper, Dr. Pepper from 1904, and various technological advancements. It also included controversial anthropological exhibits that reflected the racial and colonial attitudes of the time. It seemed like a lot of these expeditions included these controversial anthropological exhibits. Planning for the expedition began as early as 1898, but construction didn't start until 1901. The fairgrounds took 3 years to build, from 1901 to 1904. The total cost to build the fair was around 15 million, so we're looking at anywhere between $475 to $500 million. And the entire expedition itself cost around $1 billion in terms of budget or expense. Some of the highlights of technologies introduced: wireless technology. Marconi's wireless telegraph technology was demonstrated, showcasing the future of long-distance communication without cables. Electricity and lighting. Some of the electricity and lighting from the Chicago World Fair was brought over and actually improved upon. That laid out the electrical infrastructure of the fair. Automobiles. The fair highlighted the emerging automobile industry, featuring new cars from brands like Ford. So we'll be checking out old Henry Ford in the Robber Baron section later on. X-ray machines. X-ray technology was demonstrated, offering visitors a glimpse into the medical advancements that would change diagnostic practices. And refrigeration technologies were exhibited here, signaling the future of food storage and preservation. Over 19 million people attended the exhibition during its 7-month run. Also interesting to note that the Olympics were also being held in St. Louis in 1904, although they were largely overshadowed by the exposition itself. The Ferris wheel was also moved from the Chicago World Fair to here and made a reappearance. And although the Wright brothers did not attend, the fair exhibited a number of aviation technologies, showcasing the beginnings of flight. The destruction of the fair began immediately after it closed on December the 1st. So as soon as the last day was over, as soon as the last visitor was out of the grounds, straight on to demolishing it. Straight away, we need to get on with the deconstruction. No break, no celebration for the planning team, for the show team, for everyone that was involved in the organization of this event. No, just right to deconstruction. Most of the buildings, again, were designed to be temporary, constructed from materials like plaster and wood, and were demolished shortly after the fair ended. Some parts of the fairground were cleared within months, although deconstruction of certain larger structures continued into 1905. Only a few buildings, such as the Palace of Fine Arts, survived as permanent structures. So again, the whole thing was designed to be temporary, but a few of them just somehow survived and repurposed permanent structures. So again, we look at the layout here, and this is 1,200 acres. So it took them 3 years to fill out 1,200 acres, working night and day through the winter months with no electricity, no power tools. Although it was involved in the exhibition, I doubt the builders and the workforce, the labor, were granted access to such, to aid them with such a colossal project. I mean, again, just look at these buildings. Look at the size of these buildings. Look how epic this looks. Like, this is all the temporary stuff. This is the sort of stuff that you can build in a few years. Or this stuff down here in the bottom. These buildings are not temporary. Look at this. Actually, I'm going to show you the proper pictures of them now. So just like, look at the scale. Like, look at these little ants. Look at these little ants in comparison to the size of these temporary buildings. You know, little canals as well, little gondolas down here. It is almost like a little, I say a little Venice. It's bigger, look at it. Look at this. A view from the sunken garden. I wonder why it's called Sunken Garden. Sunken, mud flooded. I mean, you could take these buildings, which could have been very old, very ancient, and it would take a few years in order to replaster them, to plaster over them, to kind of touch them up a little bit, paint them all white. Look at the light bulbs here. Some fasces there, it's interesting, light bulbs on fasces. Fasces, something that we didn't explore in the Antiquitech part of the presentation, but something that we could have. Maybe do a video in the future on what fasces were, what they symbolize, and what their actual practical usage could have been. But yeah, I mean, all of these buildings here could have just been replastered, repainted, and that would take a long time, you know, to paint all of this, to replaster everything, to paint everything. That would take a number of years. You know, but to build these buildings in the time frame allocated, again, to plan all this out, to landscape all of this, to lay the foundation for all of this, you know, all of the hydraulics that are involved in order to get these fountains working like they were. Looking towards the, so this was the Palace of Electricity, this building here in the back, and this was the Festival Hall, the Palace of St. Louis across the Great Basin, illuminated at night. Look at this, man. Fuck. So beautiful. I mean, when you look at all these old buildings in Rome and across Europe, imagine them being lit up like this at one point in time. That they had that technology. I mean, this looks kind of like, you know, that picture that I shown you at the beginning of the Antiquitech part of the presentation, from, I don't know if it was like 17th, 18th century, the painting or drawing, and it's shown something at night radiating out. Like, this is what I believe they saw. They saw this, and it had water, and this is what they were showing, a reflection of the light on the water, and they were showing like the radiation of this light, of this energy coming out of these structures, and this is what it would have been. It would have been like this. Just absolutely beautiful. Think what state of mind it would put you in walking through this environment. Would you feel fearful? Would you feel scared? Would you feel anxious? Would you feel nervous? Would you feel demoralized? Would you feel disheartened? Would you feel angry? Or would you feel completely at peace, inspired? You know, think of the resonance of all of these buildings. This is what I was saying. With these buildings in place, the resonance that they create through the geometry, the shape and form, but also the actual technology built into them, it renders a heaven-like dimension onto this plane of existence. You know, walking around, just being bathed within the electromagnetic field created by all of these buildings. Think of the state of consciousness that you would be in. And then we have this picture here, the opening day of the 1904 exhibition, with a number of spectators here. But again, we don't know if this is true. We don't know any. We just know that that's the official narrative here. That this is the standard. So this is William H. Thompson and David R. Francis, president of the Louisiana Purchase Expedition Company. So it was a company, but it was a company. Well, obviously it wasn't a good company because they didn't make any profits in these exhibitions. They lost a lot of money. You know, they sank a billion plus into this, and they lost the majority of it. So there must be more to it, more incentives to it than just well, there was no financial gain. But we're told that these are the two characters here, these two chaps, and everyone's just here, you know, listening to maybe an opening speech. But how do we know that? How do we know that it is an opening speech? How do we know that they're not being told something completely different? For all we know, again, this is purely speculative, these could all be paid actors, and they're being told their orders, as in like, right, we're going to be taking a lot of pictures today. We need you to be walking around. We need you to be, you know, looking at certain structures. We need you to be, you know, ready for photos at any second of the day. We need you to make it look like this is brand new and you've never seen this before. Or maybe it is what we're being told. We don't know. You know, this is just a you know, a moment of time captured that we're looking back on, trying to interpret it, trying to work out what was happening here. And then we move on to the San Francisco 1915 World Exhibition, also known as the Panama-Pacific International Exposition. Took place from February 20th to December 4th to celebrate the completion of the Panama Canal and showcase San Francisco's recovery from the devastating 1906 earthquake. So the 1906 earthquake is another thing that there's videos of that. I didn't actually include them in this presentation, but you can search it up. The immediate aftermath that's caught on camera of the 1906 earthquake. So again, to celebrate the completion of the Panama Canal, why do you not just have the expedition in Panama City, somewhere that's a little bit more closer to home and relevant to a celebration of the Panama Canal? The fair covered 635 acres alongside San Francisco's northern waterfront near the Marina District, and featured stunning architecture, technological exhibits, art and pavilions from the countries and the United States. The Palace of Fine Arts, one of the most famous buildings from the expedition, remains an iconic landmark in San Francisco today, which is this building right here. And it's also the building that, as I was showing you that picture from 1875, which would have been taken like somewhere maybe up here or in the other direction back here, you could see the outline of these buildings, and that was in 1875. Again, I don't stand by that 100% because you just don't know, but I believe that this area here was the area that you could see a very, very like small glimpse of. The construction of the Panama-Pacific International Expedition began in 1911, and the site was completed in early 1915, just in time for the opening. Again, just in time for the opening. It took 4 years of planning and construction to bring the event to life. The total cost was around $50 million in that day, which is about 1.3 to 1.4 billion in today's money. Some of the key technologies introduced: telephones. The expedition featured demonstrations of Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, marking advancements in telecommunications, wireless telecommunications, early radio and wireless communication technologies were displayed. Aviation and aeronautics, with stunt pilots and early aeroplanes demonstrating the emerging potential for air travel. Automobiles and engines, including cutting-edge engines and manufacturing processes, so the production line. I think this was just after the Model T was released from Ford. Home appliances, electrical household appliances, including early electrical ovens, vacuum cleaners and refrigerators, were shown to a public increasingly interested in modern conveniences. Illumination and lighting, the Tower of Jewels, which is this building here. A centerpiece of the expedition was illuminated by thousands of colored glass beads that glittered with light, showcasing advances in electrical illumination. Over the course of the fair's 10-month run, the exposition attracted around 18.8 million visitors. It was a huge success in terms of visitor numbers, especially considering the global tensions building towards World War I. Electric cars were also on display. The exposition featured early examples of electric cars were still considered viable alternatives to gasoline-powered vehicles at the time. So 100 years from then to now. When did the first Tesla electric car come out? Let's just say 100 years, round it down to 100 years. 100 years, have we really developed that much? Still playing around with the idea that electric cars, you know, are this breakthrough technology. They had them back then. Over 50 sculptures were commissioned for the fair, many of which were displayed around the fairgrounds, and some of these sculptures are now located in various museums and public spaces. The process of deconstructing the exposition began soon after its official closure on December 4th. So again, same as before, as soon as these expositions are over, they do not waste any time, no haste. Straight in with the deconstructing process. Most of the buildings, which were made of plaster and other temporary materials, were dismantled and removed within a few months. The only structure to survive was this here, Palace of Fine Arts. Very interesting. So here we go, this was the, look at this. So does all of this look temporary to you? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I just want to ask that question. And intuitively, what do you feel when you see this? Does this look temporary? Does this look like something that can be built within 3 years? Look at this boulevard here. Again, oh, look at that little bit, look at this. Look at this right here, this little bit of tech. Temple of Fine Arts, just what you envision a Temple of Fine Arts to look like. Very interesting on the pediments here. Not relevant to American culture whatsoever. Here's some pictures. Again, this is looking old. You know, this just looks old here. You know, you're looking at these buildings in the foreground, and then you look over here. This just looks old, like it's already been here. Again, all lit up. Again, you know, see how the lights are coming off like this? This looks like that picture of that obelisk with all of the energy, all the light radiating out of it. If you were there at night time and you were trying to capture that, but you didn't have cameras and you had to draw it, you would draw it in the same way, that it would look like that, of like this sort of beam of energy just radiating outwards. Temple of Fine Arts as well, around the back of it. Look at these little obelisks. Obelisk, 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 obelisk. I mean, all these big Greco-Roman columns. I mean, it kind of looks old. It looks weathered. This here. I mean, techie on this. All these little, it looks like little electrical pylons. What do you think? What do you think when you see that? And then some curiosities of the World Fair. So this isn't from the San Francisco. This one is from Coney Island, but it was also, these infant incubators were also exhibited in the Chicago World Fair, and they literally just had this on display where you'd walk in and you see these incubators, and you know, these little babies, these newborns were put in there to help, you know, their organs grow whilst they were, you know, on death's door. You know, and people would just walk in and see these. Whose babies are these? Where's the parents? It's like, you're just gonna, if your baby is on the verge of death, are you just gonna allow it to be exhibited like some fucking art showcase where people can just walk in and check it out? The human zoos. So this is what they did. They just built out these little villages and had all these natives. The Philippine Exposition. So this was in the St. Louis one. You know, they just had like these people just enslaved, just taken from their homeland, and then they just get put on display like a zoo for people to come and just look at them. You know, so over 2,000 indigenous peoples were exhibited on display, ranging from people in Southeast Asia, in Africa, South America, all around the world, India. And this is one of the pavilions, and you can see like all of these buildings here. Like these buildings look like cheap. Like this looks like cheap plaster, something you'd see in a playground. You know, a fairground, I should say. This is the sort of stuff you expect them to build out. Like a number of these buildings over the space of a few years. They build all of this out, and they just then tell everyone that the whole thing was built in 3 years, when in reality they built all of these buildings. This is what I see the people of these days being capable of. They built this out, you know, it's all made of plaster and wood. That really makes sense to me. All temporary, 100% agree. This is all temporary. What's not temporary is those buildings that we just look at just then. These were built around pre-existing structures. And then they had the excuse that when they wanted to deconstruct and demolish the whole site, they took the other old buildings with them. If you wanted to explore this in more detail, there is a lot of data out there surrounding these world fairs. They were, you know, they were documented, and there's a good book called Expositions Exposed by Howdy Mikowski. In fact, Howdy Mikowski, you can watch his YouTube channel. He does a lot. He's got a lot of interesting videos surrounding these world fairs. But I just wanted to give you like a glimpse and an introduction into them and their importance. So, an old legacy erased, a new legacy created. This is my thoughts. These are my thoughts regarding the world fairs of the 19th and early 20th century, that they played a monumental role in shaping modern society by showcasing the advancements of the Industrial Revolution, promoting global trade and elevating cultural exchange. These events helped shape international relationships and set the stage for urban development and introduce technologies that would define the modern world. But beneath the official narrative lay many suspicious observations that should be seriously considered and discussed further. Impossible construction timelines. Many of the world fairs, such as the 1893 Chicago World Fair and 1904 St. Louis Exposition, were built within extremely short time frames, often only 2 or 3 years, despite the massive scale and intricacy of the structures. These constructions are arguably impossible feats given the technology and labor available at the time. These buildings may not have been constructed from scratch, but rather repurposed from a more advanced and lost civilization. Temporary structures debate. Official narratives state that many of these World Fair buildings were temporary, built using plaster and wood, and intended to be dismantled after the fair. However, the grander durability and intricate designs of some structures, such as the Machinery Hall in Chicago or the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco, contradicts this narrative about their temporary nature. Re-education camps. These fairs seem to have been used to re-educate the public by introducing a new version of history, aligned with the goals of the elite powers. It is arguable that the official historical narrative was rewritten during this period to erase evidence of an old world civilization. The fairs, in this view, were part of a global effort to introduce a new world order based on industrialization and capitalism, while erasing knowledge of previous advanced technologies and societal structures. Reintroduction of old world technologies. Many of the technologies showcased at these fairs, such as electricity, air travel, and advanced construction techniques, were not newly invented, but rather reintroduced from the old world. The old world fairs were a means to reintroduce the sanitized versions of these technologies while keeping their full potential hidden from the public. and financial failures and motives. Several of these fairs, such as the 1904 St. Louis Exposition, faced significant financial challenges, often costing far more to build than they earned in revenue, suggesting that these fairs were not intended to be profitable, but rather served as vehicles for a larger agenda, including the destruction of old world structures and the systematic resetting of history. The financial failures, therefore, were part of the effort to quickly dismantle and erase these grand structures. Now, what do you think? What are your thoughts? I'd like to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this presentation and feel inspired to support both yourself and this channel, then head over to primalalchemy.co.uk. Awaken your potential with the world's only visionary health brand. Discover our collection of tonic herbal elixirs, rare crystals, and holistic health technologies, all chosen and created with intention, so you can focus on the energy you bring into your life. Whether you're grounding yourself, seeking clarity, or elevating your routine, Primal Alchemy supports every step of your journey. Use code REBUS10 for 10% off all superfood elixirs at primalalchemy.co.uk.